The brave rancher woke up to find his unexpected reward, a beautiful Apache wife. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you were watching from. The land out past Dry Creek was quiet that spring, still cold at night, but dry enough for fence work. Colt Brandon had been alone out there for most of the season, just him, his tools, and the slow rhythm of rebuilding what time and wind had worn down. His ranch wasn't big, just a square of hard-baked land tucked along the base of the Red Hills, a patch of earth too dry for corn, but good enough for grazing when you kept things modest. That's how Colt liked it, modest, predictable, no debts, no visitors. At 34, he'd lived more years in silence than in company. Once he'd ridden with scouts back when the war was winding down and the territory still ran hot with raids and revenge. He lost a brother to one of those rides. Wrong place, wrong time. Though Colt never blamed the Apache for it, he never quite forgave the war either. After that, he stopped chasing meaning and started building fences. No one could die from fence posts and dry cattle. He was stretching wire along the southern edge of his land when he heard it, a sound sharp enough to break through the hum of wind and hoof flies. Not cattle, not birds, something human and in pain. He straightened up, waited. There it was again, a yell, quick, muffled, followed by a low, ragged sound like a growl too big for a dog. Colt moved fast. He unwrapped the reins from the post, climbed onto his bay gelding, and kicked toward the dry gulch. He didn't know what he was riding into, but his gut tightened the way it used to before a shootout. His hand stayed close to the Winchester across his saddle. It took a few minutes to reach the rise above the gulch. The horse stumbled to a stop on its own. Colt spotted the bear first. Big, mean-looking, ribs showing under its hide, clearly riled and hungry. It was moving over something on the ground, a man. Colt dismounted in one clean motion, took position behind a stand of mesquite, steadied his aim, and fired once into the animal's shoulder. The bear reared and turned toward the sound. Colt didn't flinch. The second shot took it in the neck. The third caught it square between the eyes. It dropped. He waited to be sure. The gulch went quiet again. No wind, no bird song. He walked down slowly, rifle still raised. The man on the ground wasn't moving much. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and steady, soaking into the cracked dirt. Colt crouched beside him, keeping one eye on the bear's still body. The man was older, gray, threaded through his black braids, face lineage from sun and years. Apache by the clothing and the beads, though none of the war paint or weapons Colt had seen in younger braves. Colt put two fingers to the man's neck. Still alive, barely. The man's eyes opened, glassy but focused. They met Colt's without fear. Colt exhaled hard. "All right," he muttered. "Let's get you out of here." There was no way the man could walk. Colt folded the Winchester under his arm, lifted the elder carefully, and carried him up to the horse. He'd done this before, dead weight from battlefields or drunkards on cattle drives. This was different, though. This man wasn't a burden. He was someone's father, maybe someone's grandfather. Just a man who went for a walk and met the wrong beast. Colt slung him across the saddle and climbed up behind, one hand keeping the man steady, the other holding the reins. The ride back to the cabin was slow. He felt the man's breathing grow shallow against his arm. The blood was still wet on Colt's shirt by the time they reached the cabin. The place was simple. Timber walls, stone hearth, one bed, one chair. Colt opened the door with his boot, laid the man down on the cot, and lit the oil lamp. He moved fast, water on a boil, needle and thread, a clean knife from the drawer. He washed his hands, then tore the elder's shirt open and started cleaning the wound. The bear had torn through skin and muscle but hadn't broken bone. Luck, if you believed in it. The man groaned once when Colt poured the hot water. "Yeah," Colt said, voice low. "That part hurts." He worked in silence for over an hour, hands steady, focus absolute. He sewed the deep gashes in tight, slow lines, packed the worst spots with cloth, and splinted the twisted arm using an old hickory shaving stick. It wasn't clean, not by a doctor's measure, but it would hold. When it was done, Colt sat down in the chair by the fire and watched the man breathe in out barely. He wasn't used to company, Wasn't sure what came next, but the thought of letting a man die alone on a dirt path didn't sit right with him. Not after all the dying he'd seen. He poured water into a cup and sat by the bedside. The man didn't reach for it, just breathed shallow and even. Colt leaned back, let the quiet settle. He hadn't asked who the man was, didn't know if the tribe would come looking for him, didn't care much either way. He'd done what needed doing. That was enough. The elder didn't speak for 3 days. Colt didn't expect him to. He checked the man's bandages each morning, replaced the soaked cloths with clean ones, and spooned broth between his cracked lips. The old man swallowed when he could, turned his head slightly when Colt dabbed at the sweat, but never tried to talk. His eyes stayed sharp, though, watching every movement from the cot, tracking Colt as he moved about the cabin. Colt didn't ask questions. He figured if the man wanted to talk, he would. In the meantime, he kept to routine, feeding the horses, checking the lines, hauling water. He worked quietly like always, but there was a different weight now, the sound of another breath in the room, the sense that someone was watching, even if they never said a word. On the 4th morning, Colt came in with a bundle of dry wood under his arm and found the cot empty. His chest jumped. He set the wood down fast and scanned the room. The door hadn't been touched. The rifle still rested against the wall. Then a sound, movement by the hearth. The old man had pulled himself out of bed, sat cross-legged near the fire, and was staring at the flame. He looked pale, hunched forward with effort, but there was no panic in him. He didn't look lost or delirious. He looked like a man doing what needed doing, same as Colt. "You should be down," Colt said, keeping his voice even. The man didn't look up, didn't seem offended either. He spoke for the first time in a low, graveled voice. "You did not ask who I was." Colt stood still, unsure how to answer. "I figured you'd tell me if it mattered." The elder nodded slowly. "It does." Colt crossed the room, crouched near the fire, but kept a respectful distance. The air smelled of boiled linen and pine smoke. Outside, wind pressed softly against the shutters. "My name is Toka," the elder said. "My people are 10 ridges east, past the rocks shaped like teeth." Colt knew the place, had ridden near it once. "You saved my life," the man continued. "That is seen." Colt shrugged, did what anyone should do. Toka looked at him for the first time, really looked. His face was sharp with age, lined with sun, but his eyes were steady. "No," he said, "not anyone." He didn't explain further. Instead, he asked for more water, and Colt helped him back to the cot. That was all. The next morning, Toka was gone. Colt woke to find the bed empty again, but this time the fire was cold and the door wide open. No sign of struggle, no footprints in the dust, washed away by the night's breeze. No note, no markings, nothing. Colt stood on the porch for a long time, looking out toward the ridgelines. A part of him expected the man to return. Another part knew better. The day passed slow, quiet, familiar. But something hung in the air now, a restlessness. That night, Colt didn't sleep well. He woke early, before dawn, with light just starting to soften the edges of the sky. He reached for the kettle, thinking about chores, and stopped. Someone was in the cabin. She sat near the cold fire, back to him, hands folded in her lap. He hadn't heard the door, hadn't heard a step. The woman didn't move when he sat up. She just waited. Her skin was bronze from sun. Her long black hair was slightly waved, loose down her back, but decorated with 2 leather strips that had fallen over her shoulder. She wore a torn deerskin dress, low cut at the front, the strap on one side hanging half loose. Her thighs were visible through a long rip in the hem, and the fabric clung to her hips in a way that made Colt's breath catch. Not out of lust, but out of confusion. There was a satchel by her bare feet. She had walked a long way. She didn't flinch when he stood. Colt reached slowly for his shirt. "You lost?" She turned her head, her eyes met his, dark, wide, unblinking. "No." Her voice was soft, steady. He studied her face. She wasn't scared, wasn't weak either, but she was silent in the way someone became after too much had been taken. Like she'd already been through every version of pain, and now only wanted stillness. You hungry? He asked. A beat passed. She gave a small nod. He made her food, eggs, bread, some dried meat. She ate quietly by the hearth while he sat across the room, unsure what to ask. When she was finished, she stood and faced him. My name is Sana, she said. Toka is my grandfather. That stopped him. I don't understand. He sent me. My people, they believe a life saved must be honored. Sometimes a woman is sent. Colt's jaw tensed. He stood slowly, not angry but troubled. I didn't do it for that. I know. He looked at her, really looked now. She wasn't ashamed, but there was something in her voice, a tightness. This wasn't a gift, it was an exile, a quiet punishment wrapped in tradition. She had been cast out under the guise of honor. Colt rubbed a hand over his mouth. You don't owe me anything. I stay if you allow. You got somewhere else to go? No. Silence settled again, this time heavier. Colt looked at her bare feet, the worn leather satchel, the tired curve of her shoulders, the tear in her dress. There was no place for her to return. He understood that now. You can stay, he said at last, but you're not mine. She lowered her gaze, not ashamed, just relieved. I know. He took the extra blanket from the shelf and handed it to her without a word. She accepted it, nodded once, and lay down on the floor by the fire, folding her body beneath it like it was more warmth than she'd had in days. Colt sat on the edge of the cot and stared at the fire. She had been sent, but she hadn't come to belong. She had come to surrender. And now, so he had him. The morning came without sound. Colt had risen early, like he always did, boots laced tight, coat shrugged over his shoulders before the sun reached the cabin window. He didn't look toward the fireplace right away, he didn't want to, but he heard the shift of cloth, the small exhale of someone stirring, and knew she was still there. Sana hadn't moved much during the night. She was curled beneath the blanket, one hand resting beneath her cheek, her body turned slightly toward the fire's dead embers. Her dress had slipped higher on her thigh while she slept, revealing the smooth, dust-marked curve of her hip. Colt looked away quickly, not because he was ashamed, but because he knew what it meant for a man like him to look too long at a woman like that. One sent, one with nowhere to go, one trying to survive. He stepped outside to let the air clear his head. The morning chill bit through his coat. The land was the same as ever. Wide, quiet, stretching out under pale skies. He walked the line from the cabin to the barn, checked on the horses, filled their troughs. It steadied him. It always had. And still her presence followed him. Not loud, not intrusive, just there. By the time he returned, Sana was awake. She sat on the floor with her knees pulled up, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her long hair had fallen forward, hiding most of her face. She wasn't crying, wasn't speaking. She was just waiting. Colt moved slowly, took a pot off the shelf, and started a fire in the stove. You drink coffee? He asked. A pause. Yes. He poured 2 cups once it was ready, handed one to her. She took it without speaking, held it in both hands. Her fingers were rougher than he expected, calloused like someone who'd known labor, not some dainty tribal daughter. He noticed a small red mark along her wrist, half-healed. It looked like a rope burn. He didn't ask. They sat that way for a while, him at the table, her on the floor. Finally, he spoke again. Why you? He kept his voice even. If Toka has a whole tribe, why send you? Why not someone else? Her lips parted. The answer didn't come fast. They say I'm too quiet, she said, that I make men nervous, that no warrior ever asked for me. Colt frowned. Because you don't talk? Because I don't smile when they want, because I don't pretend. He looked at her closely. She didn't say it with bitterness, just fact. My mother was a healer. She died last winter. After that, I was extra in the way. I helped old ones. I carried water, but I had no husband, no child, and I would not marry a man who... She didn't finish the sentence. Colt nodded slowly. So they sent you to me instead. She looked down into her coffee. It is how they honored him, my grandfather, but it was also how they removed me. Colt leaned back, letting that settle. He had known men who were discarded by their own, scouts who drank too much, drifters who came back from war too changed to belong. He hadn't thought of it in a woman, but it was the same. No place to go, no one to ask. "You want to go back?" he asked. "No." "Why not?" She looked up and for the first time, held his eyes without looking away. "They never asked me to stay." That silenced him. The hours passed quietly after that. She helped him carry water, no need for words. He offered her shoes, an old pair left behind by a ranch hand long gone, and she accepted with a quiet nod. He showed her where the food was kept. She began cleaning without being asked. It wasn't obedience. It was understanding, a kind of silent truce between two people used to being alone. That night he laid a spare bedroll beside the fire. "You can sleep here," he said. "You don't have to stay on the floor." She moved slowly, lay down with her back to the flames, pulling the blanket over her hips. Her hair spilled across the pillow. Before he turned in, Colt asked one more question, something he hadn't wanted to ask but couldn't keep down anymore. "That scar on your wrist, who gave it to you?" Sana didn't answer for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "A traitor. Years ago, before the tribe took me back." His stomach turned. "They took you back after that?" "Yes," she said, "but only halfway." Colt didn't sleep much that night. He listened to the fire crackle and her soft, even breathing beside it. And he understood something that hadn't fully reached him before. She hadn't been given to him. She had been thrown away. And now, somehow, she was his responsibility. Not because of what she'd suffered, but because he was the first one who hadn't asked for anything in return. The wind came strong that morning. It rattled the side of the cabin, sent dust curling across the yard, and shook the trees behind the barn until they creaked like old joints. Colt stepped out into it with his collar turned up and his hat pulled low, his breath showing faint in the chill. Spring in the high desert was always a back and forth thing, warm one day, bitter the next. He fed the horses in silence, moved through the routines like clockwork. But his mind wasn't still. Inside the cabin, she was moving again, cleaning without being asked, folding what little laundry there was, stirring the fire back to life. She'd been there 4 days now, and they still hadn't spoken more than a few dozen words. But her presence had filled every corner of the place. She never asked what was hers to touch. She just helped quietly, always barefoot, always moving like she'd been there a year. He noticed things, how she tied her hair now in 2 thick braids that hung behind her shoulders, how she'd stitched the tear on her dress with a bit of twine from his kit, how she sometimes stared out the small side window for long minutes with no expression, like she was watching something far away. That day he brought it back kindling and found her sweeping the far corner by the stove. She straightened when she saw him, and for the first time, he saw a hesitation in her. "May I stay longer?" she asked, voice even. Colt blinked. It wasn't a question he expected. "Ain't nobody told you to leave. I just wanted to be sure." He studied her face. Her eyes didn't plead. They just waited, like she was ready to leave if he flinched. "You want to stay?" he said plainly. "Yes." "Then stay." She gave the faintest nod. That afternoon, while the wind died down and the sun stretched across the yard, they worked side by side, fixing a broken rail on the corral fence. She held the wood while he hammered, passing nails without a word. Sweat lined her brow, but she didn't wipe it. When the job was done, she stood back, breathing heavy, chest rising beneath the shape of her stitched dress, and looked at the ranch beyond. "It's quiet here," she said. "I like quiet." "So do I." Back inside, he poured water into the basin for washing. She stepped past him to grab a cloth. Her hand brushed his just for a second. He didn't move. Neither did she. Their eyes met. He didn't look away. Not this time. There was a pause, thick, slow, like the air itself had stopped moving. Then she gently took the cloth from his hand, dipped it, and began wiping the dust from her arms. That night, they ate dinner at the same table for the first time, not across the room, not with one of them on the floor. He handed her the bread. She passed him the beans. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't formal, but it was something. After the meal, she sat on the floor again, folding her legs under the blanket. Colt brought the chair closer to the fire. Sana, he said, her name quiet but clear. She looked up. Do you want to talk about it? She didn't ask what he meant. She knew. He was giving her space, but also asking if she wanted to let any of it out. After a long silence, she answered. When I was taken, she said, they tied me to a wagon. I walked 4 days like that. They fed me scraps, laughed at my body when they tried to trade me to a fort in the north. The officer refused, said I was too bruised. Colt's throat went tight. My tribe took me back, she went on, but not truly. They fed me, let me sleep, but I was no longer one of them. My body had been touched. I was no longer good. He clenched his jaw. You are good. She didn't respond. You're not dirty, not broken, not something. Her voice cracked a little. But I was given to you like a debt. You weren't given, Colt said, and you were sent. She looked at him. He added, slower this time, and I didn't accept you as payment. They sat quietly again. Then, small, unsure, her hand moved out from beneath the blanket and reached for his on the chair arm. She didn't hold it, just placed hers on top, soft and trembling. He didn't move, let her leave it there. Warmth spread from the spot. Not lust, not pity, just warmth. After a long time, she whispered, I'm not afraid now. Colt looked into the fire. His hand didn't shift. His breath didn't rush. He only said low and honest, then you're safe here. It was the first night she slept not on the floor, but on the bedroll beside his cot. And when he woke in the morning, her hand was still lightly resting near his, not clinging, not claiming, just staying. By the sixth morning, it was no longer a question of whether Sana belonged there. It was only a matter of how. Colt woke to the smell of hot bread and sage. He sat up slowly, half expecting the fire to be dead and the silence to be the same heavy kind that used to greet him every morning. But the room wasn't quiet the same way anymore. It breathed now, it moved. Sana stood near the stove, bare feet planted steady on the plank floor, one hand holding a wooden spoon, the other tucked against her waist where the old deerskin dress hung looser now, patched more carefully along the seams. She'd added one of his old shirts beneath it for warmth, leaving the top of the dress still low, her curves soft but strong, uncovered just enough to remind him she wasn't trying to hide anymore. She looked at him and offered a small nod. He nodded back. It was all they needed. After breakfast, she followed him outside, not because he asked, but because she already knew what the day called for. The spring wind had shifted again. A broken tree limb blocked the East Creek, and the cattle hadn't come down for water. Colt hitched the mule and filled the wagon with rope, tools, and saw blades. Sana climbed in beside him, sat with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes scanning the land as they rode. She didn't ask where they were going. He didn't explain. It wasn't the kind of bond people would understand if they saw it, but it was there. At the creek, the work took most of the morning. Colt climbed into the cold shallows, boots soaked, using the axe to break apart the heavy branch while Sana steadied the rope he tied. When the last section broke loose, the current moved again, and he climbed out, drenched and breathing heavily. You should have stayed back, he muttered, catching his breath. She took one look at him, stepped forward, and pressed the edge of her skirt to his face to wipe away the water. I didn't come to stay back, she said. Colt swallowed. Something shifted in him, something simple, but strong. She had said it like a statement of fact, not defiance, not emotion, just truth. When they returned to the cabin that afternoon, he opened the small trunk at the foot of his bed and pulled out a folded bundle wrapped in faded muslin. It had been his mother's, a simple cotton dress, never worn out here, too fine for ranch life, but whole, sturdy, clean. He held it out. Yours if you want it. Sana looked at it for a long time, then at him. She asked, Wei. He shrugged. You've already earned it. I didn't come to earn. He nodded. Then take it because it's yours now, not given, not owed. Her fingers brushed his as she accepted it. For the first time, he saw her smile. Not wide, not performative, just a slight upward curve at the edge of her mouth, real. That night, she didn't wear it yet, but she sat on the cot instead of the floor. They shared a plate, not just a meal, talked a little more. She told him she used to carve with bone, that her mother had taught her healing plants. He told her about his brother, how he died in a crossfire years ago, how Colt had ridden too slow to stop it. I don't blame your people, Colt said. I blame the war. Still do. Sana's hand reached across the table. She placed it lightly over his. Then we both lost to the same fire, she whispered. He didn't pull away. Before they turned in for the night, Colt lit a lantern and checked the lock on the door, a habit he'd done for years. But when he turned, Sana was already beneath the blanket on her cot, watching him. Will I always be separate? She asked. The question caught him off guard. You're not. She lowered her eyes. I don't want to be a burden or a shadow. Colt walked over, pulled the second blanket from the shelf, and handed it to her. Then don't be either, he said. Just be here. He stood there for a beat, waiting. Then she slid the blanket back, made space beside her, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Colt lay down close enough to feel her warmth. They didn't touch, not yet. But her breath was steady, her body relaxed. And when she whispered, "Thank you," into the dark, it wasn't for the dress or the food or the cot. It was for the space he'd given her to be whole. And when he answered, voice low, "You're safe now," he meant it, not as a promise, but as fact. The sky turned amber that evening, a deep gold bleeding into the edges of the horizon. Colt watched it from the porch with his sleeves rolled up and his hands dusty from the fence mending. They'd finished just before sundown. Behind him, the soft clang of the cooking pot echoed from inside the cabin where Sana moved barefoot, her figure familiar now, her presence not foreign but necessary. She had worn the cotton dress. It fit her tightly across the chest, hugging the curves her old one had barely contained. The neckline dropped lower than it likely had on his mother, and Colt had noticed it when she first stepped out in it that morning. Noticed and then forced himself to keep his eyes up. She didn't hide from his glance, didn't offer herself either. She just let herself be seen as she was, whole. That evening, she brought him his plate like she always did now. Warm beans, thick bread, and slices of roasted squash from what was left of last season's trade. She sat beside him at the table, her body brushing close to his as she reached across to pour water into his tin cup. Something smells good, he said, his voice rough. She glanced at him with that faint smile again. It's not the food. He looked at her, unsure if she meant what he thought, but she didn't explain. After dinner, she cleaned the plates while he stoked the fire. Neither said much. There wasn't a need. The night held something different in it, something quieter, heavier, not tension, not fear, but a sense of decision. She braided her hair slowly, sitting cross-legged on the floor, her back straight, her eyes low. He watched her hands work, noticed the rhythm of her fingers, how careful she was with the strands. When she finished, she looked at him and didn't look away. Do you still see me as something left at your door? She asked. The question came low, nearly a whisper. Colt took a breath. No, I see you as someone who stayed. Her eyes didn't shift. Then may I stay closer tonight? His chest rose. He didn't answer right away, not because he doubted her, but because he respected what it meant. She wasn't asking to share a bedroll. She wasn't asking to repay anything. She was asking to choose. He nodded once. If that's what you want. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't. He stood and moved to the cot, sat down, and waited. She followed after a few seconds, slow and deliberate, then settled beside him. The firelight danced across her skin, her collarbone glowing above the curve of the cotton neckline, her legs folded under her. The room smelled of pine smoke and the faint sweetness of the sage she'd added to the washwater earlier. She reached for his hand first, not tentative, not shy, just steady. Colt let his fingers close around hers. Her skin was soft, warm, strong. She leaned in and pressed her lips to his. Not a brush, a kiss. Honest, real. He kissed her back, careful not to pull, not to press, just to meet her where she was. Her hands moved to his face, then to his chest, exploring without rush. She breathed his name against his skin. Colt, she whispered. Just once. They lay back together, slow, breath sinking. He moved the blanket over them both, their bodies pressed close, her dress sliding halfway down her shoulder. He kissed her neck, She clutched his side. No one hurried. The night was slow, honest. The silence wasn't between them anymore. It wrapped around them like a promise. When she lay against his chest afterward, his arm over her waist, she asked softly, "Will it always be this way?" He looked down at her, her hair loose now, splayed across his bare chest. "If you stay," he said, "I'll make damn sure it is." She didn't speak again that night, but she didn't move either. And when they both drifted into sleep, she was still there, wrapped in his warmth, the fire fading to embers. The days that followed moved quietly, like something settled in place, not soft, but sure. Colt still rose early, still checked the fences and fed the stock, still kept his rifle near the door and his boots by the bed. But now, when he opened his eyes, she was there. Not curled on the floor, not across the room, but beside him. Sometimes with her cheek against his arm, sometimes with her hand tucked under his. Sana didn't change overnight. She didn't talk more than she used to, didn't start asking for things or laying claim to the space. But the way she moved was different, grounded. She stood taller, smiled a little more, and began humming soft, wordless notes while she cooked or swept. Colt didn't ask what the tune meant. He didn't need to. They had their own rhythm now. Two people used to silence, sharing the same fire, the same labor, the same bed. It wasn't romance in the way others would name it. There were no flowers, no promises said out loud. But there was something else. Routine, stability, the gentle act of not leaving. That was how she knew he meant it, and how he knew she had chosen him. One afternoon, after they hauled water from the creek, Sana crouched near the porch, her sleeves rolled up, scrubbing the last of the old cooking pots. Colt sat nearby, sharpening a blade on a whetstone, his eyes on the blade, but his attention flicking toward her now and again. "Your people," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Do you think they'll come again?" Sana paused, her hand slowed over the rim of the pot. "No," she said. Toka made his gesture. "That was the end of it." "You sure?" "I was sent once, they won't send for me again." He nodded, jaw flexing slightly. "You afraid they might try to take you back?" She shook her head. "They don't take back what they discard. Not women. Not like me." He didn't press. He didn't need more explanation. What mattered now wasn't what they had done to her. It was that she no longer belonged to their judgment. After a long pause, she set the pot aside and wiped her hands. Then she walked over, slow and steady, and knelt beside where he sat. "I want a name," she said. Colt blinked. "You already have one." "No," she said, "and they gave it to me when I was born, before I became what I am. I want something that's mine, something you give me." He stared at her, searching her face. She was serious. "You sure?" he asked. "Yes." He let the whetstone fall still. "All right," he said. He thought for a long moment, then added, "You're strong. You stayed when you didn't have to. You belong here, not because you were sent, but because you built something here." She waited. "Then your name," he said, "should mean that." He didn't give her some fancy word, just leaned closer, voice low. "Stay." She blinked. "Stay?" He nodded. "From stay, because that's what you've done when no one else ever has." Her eyes flickered with something he hadn't seen before. Surprise, maybe even emotion close to tears. But she didn't cry. She only leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his hands on his knees. "I will keep it," she whispered. That night she wore the cotton dress again, freshly cleaned. She tied her braids with new leather he had cut for her. And while she stirred the stew, she asked something new. "If I stayed forever," she said without turning, "what would I be to you?" Colt set the tin plate down. "You mean, what do I call you?" She turned slowly, her eyes steady on him. "Yes." He stood, crossed the room, and reached for her hand. "You wouldn't be my guest," he said. "You wouldn't be a helper or a debt." He paused, then added, clear and calm, "You'd be my wife." Sana didn't flinch, didn't speak right away. She gave the smallest nod. "I want that," she said, "but only if I stay because I choose." He stood up closer, then, "Choose me." She reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek, her other hand pressing to his chest. "I already did," she whispered. And when he kissed her that time, it wasn't slow or uncertain. It was certain, sure, and claimed. The fire burned low into the night, and the woman once discarded now sat beside her man, her name her own, her place not given, but built with her hands and her will. By early summer, the land had changed. Greener along the creek beds, grass climbing higher near the fence lines, and the wind less bitter, brushing softer through the cabin windows. So had they. Colt didn't talk about what had shifted between them. He didn't need to. The evidence was everywhere. 2 tin cups instead of one drying by the basin, her dress hanging next to his shirt on the peg, the way their boots lined up side by side at the cabin door. At night, she rested her head on his chest, and he woke with her arm across his ribs like she had always belonged there. But with peace came small questions he hadn't voiced. Would she still stay once the quiet wore off? Once the chores piled up and the days grew long? He got his answer the day the horse cut its leg on the wire. They had just returned from checking the creek line, and Colt was removing the bridle when he noticed blood dripping along the rear fetlock. A clean slice, but deep. He muttered under his breath, grabbing cloth and water. Sana didn't wait to be asked. She knelt beside the animal, held its reins with a firm hand, and pressed the rag to the wound without flinching. It's not just surface, she said. It'll need to be closed. Colt looked at her, surprised. You know that? My mother taught me. She washed the leg carefully, cleaned the blade, and stitched the flesh while the horse breathed heavily through its nose. Colt held the flank steady. Neither of them said much, but by the end the horse stood still, wound wrapped, and Sana's hands were red and steady. After she stepped back, wiping her palms on her skirt. She taught me everything, Bern, she said, but I never thought I'd use it here. He looked at her with something new, respect, deeper than before. It wasn't just that she'd helped. It was how she did it, without panic, without pride. That night, while they sat outside watching the sun drop behind the ridgeline, he broke the silence. You ever think of leaving? He asked. Sana turned toward him slowly. No, not even once. I thought about what I'd be if I had, she said. What I'd still be running from, but not where I'd go. I don't want to go. Colt rubbed a hand across his face, voice low. Sometimes I wonder if I've got anything left to give a woman. She looked at him hard. You gave me quiet, shelter, room to choose. That's more than most men offer. He didn't respond. She leaned into him, her shoulder resting lightly against his. I didn't need saving, she added. I needed staying. You did that. It was the closest either of them had come to saying, I love you, and it was enough. Later that week, Colt brought her a simple band he had carved from bone. It wasn't fancy, no stone, no polish, just smooth, warm, and shaped by his own hands. He didn't make a speech when he gave it to her, just held it out. She looked at it for a long time, then slipped it onto her finger and nodded once. I'll wear it, she said, because I want to, not because I have to. That night, when they lay together, she pressed close under the blanket, her bare legs curled into his. He kissed her again, slower than before, his fingers brushing over her waist, up the curve of her side, then stopping just below her chest. Her breath caught slightly, not in fear, but readiness. She moved her hand to guide his. She wanted this, not out of obligation, but because she had chosen this bed, this man, this life. They made love quietly, without rush, without need to prove anything, just hands and warmth and breath. When it was over, she rested her forehead to his. I've never had a home before, she whispered. You got one now. And a husband? He answered without hesitation. Yeah, then I have everything. And she did. There were no vows spoken, no paper signed, but in the silence of the cabin, wrapped in the heat of each other's presence, they had become something permanent, something neither tribe nor law had given them. Only choice. The summer deepened, dry and golden, with days stretched long and slow across the New Mexico sky. Dust settled on the fence posts, cicadas hummed under the porch, and the creek shrank to a whisper. But inside the cabin, something had taken root. Not passion, not fire, something steadier, solid. They lived now as husband and wife, not by law, not by church, but by every meaningful measure that mattered more. Two hands on every task, two voices at the end of every day. And when the nights cooled again, their warmth stayed, wrapped together beneath the same quilt, limbs entwined, not for need but belonging. Colt had never been one for words, but Sana never asked for them. She understood things in gestures. When he brought her wild sage from the edge of the property, she dried it without comment, but kissed his cheek that night. When she darned his socks and left a strip of blue thread stitched along the inside seam, her own quiet mark, he wore them like it was a wedding ring. And yet, one final question lingered between them, unspoken. What if someone came looking? One morning while Colt sharpened a hoe in the shade behind the barn, he saw her standing still in the field, frozen. She held a water bucket half full and stared off toward the far ridge. 3 riders. Colt stood slowly, not panicked, but alert. He grabbed the rifle from where it leaned and walked toward her. Not fast, not loud. "Stay behind me," he said. She didn't argue. The riders came slowly, not bandits, he could tell by the way they sat their horses, but not neighbors either, Apache. When they stopped at the fence line, one dismounted and approached alone. He was younger than Toka, well-dressed, serious. Colt kept the rifle low, not raised. "You are Colt Brandon?" the man asked. "I am. I am of Toka's blood, his son." Colt's shoulders eased slightly. "Toka passed," the man said. Colt nodded. "I'm sorry. He said you should know." Colt lowered the rifle all the way. "He also said the woman stays with you." Colt felt Sana move behind and, "She stays by choice," he said. "No one's holding her here." The man studied them both, then turned to Sana. "You were sent to honor a life," he said to her. "We did not expect you to remain." "I remained," Sana said, "because I was finally seen, finally asked, and finally allowed to answer." The man gave a long look, then with a bearish nod, he stepped back. "No one will come again," he said. "You belong where you are now." He mounted, turned, and the 3 riders disappeared over the ridge without another word. Colt and Sana stood in the dust, the sun behind them, the wind carrying only the sound of horses retreating. That night, they didn't speak of it. They didn't need to. Colt took her hand in bed and rested it on his chest. "You think they meant it?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "You think we're safe now?" She turned to face him, her voice soft but sure. "We've always been safe, you just didn't know it yet." In the weeks that followed, Sana began planting again. Small rows of squash, beans, herbs her mother once knew by scent. She started keeping a pouch of dried seeds tied at her waist, a small promise carried close. Colt built her a second table for drying herbs. He carved her name into the edge of the window frame, "Stay," with the same blade she used to stitch the horse. One morning, while the sun broke low through the trees, she placed his hand on her belly and held it there. He looked up at her. She nodded. "You're sure?" "I am." He didn't speak, just pulled her into him and held her for a long time, eyes closed. She didn't weep, neither did he. But they both knew what it meant. No more waiting, no more wondering. She had been sent, yes, but she had stayed by her own will. And now a new life would stay with them. A child born not of obligation, not of survival, but of choice, of staying, of love. And in that quiet cabin in the New Mexico territory, with a fire burning low and a woman's name carved into the wood, the story ended not in farewell, but in forever. The story of Colt and Sana unveils a powerful life lesson. True belonging is born from choice and mutual respect, not obligation or possession. Colt, a solitary rancher shaped by loss, saves an Apache elder without expecting reward, only to find Sana, sent as a supposed gift, but truly discarded by her tribe. Their bond grows not from tradition or debt, but from shared silence, labor, and the courage to see each other as whole. Sana, marked by pain and rejection, finds a home not because Colt claims her, but because he offers her freedom to choose. Colt, in turn, discovers that opening his heart again doesn't diminish his strength, but deepens his purpose. From their love, sealed by quiet gestures, a carved bone ring, a name chosen for staying, teaches us that the most profound connections are built on trust, presence, and the decision to stand together through life's hardships. In a world quick to judge or discard, Colt and Sana remind us to honor those who stay, to build spaces where others can heal, and to choose love over fear. Their story stirs the heart, urging us to reflect on the moments we've chosen to stay or let someone else belong. What does this story mean to you? Have you ever found home in an unexpected place or person? Share your thoughts in the comments. We're eager to hear your experiences. If this tale touched you, please subscribe and join our community for more stories that inspire and connect us. Let's keep building this journey together.